Hello and welcome to the Power Pod. I'm your host, Matthew Cohen, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with StephanZA. For those of you who might not know, Stefan is a really rapidly growing political commentator, specifically in South Africa. I know you've got almost about 60,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel, and you happen to be a member of Truth Report. So, thanks for joining me today. How have you been?
No, thank you first and foremost for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and it is a privilege because I do follow your work as well very closely. There's not many good political voices in South Africa, so when you find someone that you go, oh, there's some saints here, you sort of hold on to that, right? You immediately bookmark the page and go, right, I'll be back here. So thank you so much for having me, and I've been good. How have you been?
No, I've also been great. And likewise. That's why I thought I got to have you on the show because, look, I'm always looking for people who not just have, I would say, accurate analysis of what's going on, but also people that sometimes are willing to say what's not popular, even though they know that it could be true. And even because, a lot of people these days, I'm not sure if you feel this way, but I feel like a lot of people these days, even as we have Truth Report and alternative media coming through, they still scared to sort of break rank. And one of the big things that I remember you actually said on X, Stefan, which really caught my eye, was how you spoke about the need for having sort of Christian values in South Africa. But then you also spoke about how we've got to reject these kinds of political parties which sort of are against that. And that actually leads me to my first question. So I remember how in that specific post, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you spoke about sort of rejecting the ideas of ANC, EFF, MK, DA. And while obviously we are quite used to hearing the ANC, EFF, and MK being grouped into one on a regular basis, we don't normally hear about the DA being grouped in with them. And so it's actually a bit of a two-part question. But before I get ahead of myself, I'll ask you the first part, which is, what is it that made you group the DA in with those parties?
All right, so I just want to say for everyone and for you as well, if I'm looking here, it's because that's where my screen is, so that's where I can see you. That's the camera. So please forgive me because I can sometimes get a bit confused and then I'm just looking to speak to the guy that I'm actually speaking to. But yeah, so for me, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people have made, and I spent a lot of time back in my previous life as a gamer, and this is maybe a bit of a preamble is required. So for those of you who aren't gamers, who don't know anything about gaming, I spent 10 years of my life making content about video games, and I watched slowly as this hyper progressivism started to enter the gaming space and how it actually made games worse. Right, so eventually you would have games that no one can play because the story is an absolute trash heap, but it needs to be because it needs to be progressive. And so I had genuine questions. I was like, well, what causes this? And this led me down rabbit holes. And eventually I read Das Kapital. I read the Communist Manifesto. I read pretty much everything I could get my hands on from the left and the things that they believe. And very quickly, I started to make connections. Things that don't seem like it's connected to communism is in fact very much connected to communism because it all starts from the exact same mindset, right? It's this mindset of big government solves the problems, and some parties will have disagreements on how much freedom the people may have. But almost all parties that I would consider to be Marxist parties believe that the state must be the final arbiter of everything, right? So the DA, I don't think anyone in a classical sense would say the DA is a Marxist party, right? Because they're really not. People would say, well, they're maybe like a social market party, right? Or maybe like democratic socialists, which is a new term that's sort of born in the last 20 years out of Europe. Oh, we're democratic socialists, or we're, democratic free market capitalists, which the secret lies behind the words that communists say, because the words they say don't actually mean what you think they mean. When a communist tells you they're a democratic socialist, all they mean is you'll have the right to vote for the amount of oppression that you're going to receive. You're going to be oppressed, but we'll allow you to vote, right? So from a market perspective, I look at the DA and I see John Steenhuisen enters office as the leader of the DA. And the second he hits office, what is the first thing he does? He does exactly what the ANC has done for the last 4 years with foot and mouth disease. No difference. He believes the government should be the one to solve the problem. He had every opportunity. He's the minister, right? He could say, farmers, here, we give you the freedom, go solve your problem. We'll help. Tell us what you need and we'll help you out with it. But for the most part, we believe that you guys can solve the problem better than we can. Instead, what does he do? He fights in court to ensure that the farmers can't exercise their own freedoms, because government must be the one to solve the issue. And I think that betrays the heart and the soul of the DA. They are fundamentally, at their core, socialists. And the issue with socialists isn't that they're all communists, right? So it's not that the DA wants to be the ANC or wants to put forward the policies of the ANC. The problem is that as you go down socialism, as you start to embrace democratic socialism or socialism more broadly, you start to see the exact thing that's happening in Europe now. You have stagnating economies. You have a stagnating business environment. Manufacturers are leaving. Energy prices are exploding. Why? Because the central command is always behind the curve. They're always too slow at adapting to the market. And so by necessity, the answer for someone who believes that the government should centrally control things is more control. So even if that isn't the goal, you will end up in a communist Soviet Union style central committee government because, well, everything sort of forces you down that road. And you see it in Europe. I mean, Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, just spoke at length about how Germany is falling behind the rest of the world, how Germany is losing manufacturing, how, you know, the energy prices is too high. And what's his answer to all of this? Government needs a committee to figure out what the hell is going on. So in other words, more committee to try and figure out the problem that is caused by the committee. That's the issue. And so that's why the DA for me is no different to the ANC. They're just not yet progressed to where the ANC naturally found themselves.
Right. It's an interesting description you give, because I think for a lot of people, you know, they'll get very upset if you say the DA is socialist, because on the face value they're not. But I think what people often forget is how politics is a spectrum, right? And it's funny because people do this to the right all the time, where they'll make as if the sort of center right and the far right is the same thing. And all of a sudden you hear it often, especially in South African media, how they'll go and call somebody right wing. And the minute you hear right wing, everybody freaks out. Nobody has a panic attack when they talk about the far left of the EFF. Yeah. That's absolutely fine. But you have that problem. But I mean, the points I'm trying to make is the DA, we can say that they're center left. Like, you know, if that's, I don't know if that's exactly right or not, but because they do confuse me quite a little bit. Also, their leadership style seems to have changed over the past few years. But I think a lot of people need to remember that when somebody says they're social democrat or democratic socialist or whatever, it's still leaning to the left. It might not be the extreme Marxist-Leninist EFF style, but it's still leaning to the left. And so I think that's an important point that we need to sort of make, right? And it's funny that you mentioned that democratic socialist side, because something that's also really interesting is I thought back to Zoran Mamdani, you know, this new New York mayor. And then you look at Jordan Hill-Lewis in Cape Town, and both of them are called that exact same label. So make of that what you will. But this really leads me to the second part of the question. So in your view, Stephan, if you had to describe your ideal political party in South Africa, the party that you believe would take the country forward, what would this party look like? What sort of politics or what sort of policies would they have?
All right. So I think first I just want to say you hit the nail on the head there, right? If you are to the left, that is already the problem, right? So you can argue about far left, like that doesn't matter. If a party falls to the left, I believe that that party is a fundamental threat to good and decent people. So this will answer your question then. What do I want from a political party? First, I want a party that prioritizes the individual as the smallest and yet the most important minority. That's important. The individual is a minority in and of itself. And if the government's job and role is to protect minorities, the individual's rights must be protected as absolute. So I want a government that views the individual as absolutely sacred in that regard. And then this government needs to understand the limits of what government can achieve. And this is where the problem comes in, because the party that I view as the perfect political party will never get elected. Because for that leader, if they're honest, they would have to stand in front of a crowd of 10,000 people and tell them, I will not improve your lives. I will not give you jobs. I will not solve your issues because it's physically impossible for me to do so without creating a whole host of new issues on the flip side of it. Because in economics, they speak about this term called unintended consequences. And that's why we pay economists as much as we do, because economists are the ones that need to figure out what are the unintended consequences of a economic decision, because there are always consequences. So that leader needs to come out and say, what I will do, I can't solve any of your problems, but what I will do is I will enable you to solve your own problems. So I will give you the freedom, I will give you the ability to solve your own problems. That's the party that I would most fundamentally support. Then there's a couple of moral issues that's super important to me. It has to be a Christian conservative party. Now, people will immediately go, oh, wait, theocracy? No. There's a big difference between a theocracy and a Christian government. The same way that a progressive, for example, wants their president to be okay with gay rights and trans rights and all the rest of it. And we don't call that a theology, right? People who voted for Mondani were not saying, oh, they just wanted a theocratic government. No, they just wanted a very progressive leader. In that same way, I want someone that believes and espouses the values that has proven to create flourishing societies. And there's no other value system that has done it better than Judeo-Christianity. That is literally the only set of values that you can point to and go, Europe, that's because of Judeo-Christianity. America, that's because of Judeo-Christianity. So why exactly would I want anything else? No other political or ideological system has proven itself capable of building a civilization. In fact, the societies that are now getting rid of Christianity are falling apart, right? In Europe specifically, most European countries now count themselves as majority atheist, and you can see what's happening there. Sure. You have European countries that's now putting people to death for depression. Right? You have girls the age of 16 that is asking the government to kill them because they're depressed. It's like, what the hell are you doing?
Euthanasia battle?
Yeah, it's the euthanasia crowd that, especially in the Scandinavian countries, that has absolutely gone crazy. I think it's in the Netherlands. There's a girl age 16 that wants to kill herself. And the government said that's okay. And it's like, wait, what? Life is precious. It's supposed to be precious. You know, we've always had suicides. And if you want to take it into your own hands, absolutely go for it. But you already know what happens when the government gets involved in this. The government has certain psychologists who get paid in order to suggest this to people, and soon you have exactly what you have in the trans movement. You have this factory, the sausage factory of young people just being told, well, life's too hard for you, go kill yourself. Well, and it's sort
Wow.
of, that's ultimately where it ends up, right? So I want a government that is Christian. And because Christianity, a lot of people don't understand this, but one of the reasons Christianity, I think, makes for the best possible political system is, in Christianity, you can't force your belief onto others, right? So that's one of the biggest things we have here in South Africa. I was talking to a guy in the comment section on one of my videos this morning who told me that one of the biggest problems with us Afrikaners is that we have this exclusivity thing. We want our things for ourselves. And my immediate retort to him was, well, why are you so hell-bent on forcing us to share with you? Why don't you build your own stuff? And it's like, well, because you guys
Right.
forced us, right, in under colonialism. And I'm like, dude, my people were forced under colonialism. We didn't accept the British rule. They came in and they just did it. We're not demanding reparations from them. We're just getting on with it and saying we'll build our own stuff. Why are you forcing us into this? A Christian government would understand, I can't force my beliefs on you, right? But as long as what you're doing isn't creating chaos in the rest of society, you're allowed to do what you do, right? There are certain things that we're
Sure.
going to clamp down on, like murder, theft, property values, property rights, those things. Those are sacrosanct and they're protected under the law. But in all other cases, you're a consenting adult, you can do whatever you want. So that's the sort of government that I would support. And I could go into more detail, but I don't want to keep you busy for like an hour discussing the theological ins and outs of a Christian government.
No, I mean that's no problem. I mean, look, well, the big takeaway was that I wanted to understand sort of like what you think would be central to that kind of a party. To a large extent, I do agree, because what people often will realize. So, I mean, look, you probably already know, like, I'm Jewish, and a lot of the people watching this, we've got a fair amount of Hindu subscribers on the channel, even
Okay.
some Muslim, like people from Middle East, Iranian expats. But I think that what we need to remember, and as you've explained, firstly, it's sort of the Judeo-Christian umbrella, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's an interesting thing, but a lot of the countries that do prosper who are not Christian countries actually seem to learn from Christian society. So, for example, a lot of people will probably say, yeah, but you're forgetting the Far East. But what a lot of people need to remember is that the Japanese, for example, started their sort of transformation after coming into contact with a lot of the Westerners. And that's when that sort of samurai era ended. And then they became all industrialized. And then you see how, Singapore.
Just to link up
go
with
ahead.
you there, just to link up with you very quickly, you wouldn't want to live in Japan in 1901, 1902. It is a very
Right.
harsh, very strict society. It is honor bound to hell and back, which means children are brought up with this idea: if you make a mistake, it curses your entire bloodline, right? So all that pressure is just on you. And then after the
Sure.
Second World War, Japan, as you said, absolutely opens up. It sort of accepts a lot of the rules of the West. And that's when it starts to flourish and actually starts to open up and become the society that most people would want to live in today.
Right. No, of course. And like, even if you look at some of the sort of Middle Eastern countries, like if you take a look at the UAE, just as a simple example, like, yes, they're prospering, but we also need to remember that a big reason for that is because they're business focused. So they understand that they have to somewhat accommodate Westerners. They have to accommodate the West. They can't impose Sharia law. It's not like Afghanistan's. It's just like worth noting. And then obviously, like Israel then's obviously, again, Jewish values, but it's kind of the same thing like what you said with Christianity, where in Judaism, conversion's very hard, so you can't actually force people. So if you're Christian or if you have a different faith, you basically just live your life within the society. So I do actually, to a large extent, agree with what you say, because I think, again, people might get offended when they say it's got to be a Christian society. What's wrong with other religions? It's not to say there's anything wrong with them. It's more just that there's a certain roadmap that works. So we just go with it, and other people are accepted as well. But yeah, like of the parties that you currently see, do you feel like there are any parties that espouse at least some of those values?
Yeah. So first, just on the, it's not that there's anything wrong. At the end of the day, what you're looking for in every society is a high trust society, right? That's ultimately what you look for. And in order for a society to be high trust, we have to all be able to agree on a set of principles through which we're going to live our lives. And we need to know that everyone else will also agree to those exact same sets of principles. And so we know that some principles are better than others. So, for example, when we look at the countries that hardline enforce Sharia law, they're not prosperous countries because Sharia law is antithetical to human flourishing. But you look at some of the Muslim countries that aren't as hardline Sharia law, like the UAE, even Saudi Arabia starting to open up a little bit more now. And you see, even with Saudi Arabia, they sort of have two sets of rules, right? For the people who bring in money, yeah, do your thing. And then for their own people, they're a little bit more strict. So you don't really, you don't really see the poverty that exists in Saudi Arabia because they hide that very well. But for the most part, the oil has made them very rich. And so that's a lucky thing. We'd have to ask what happens if you remove the oil from the UAE or from Saudi Arabia? Is those values still going to actually lead to a flourishing society? But ultimately, as long as you can find a set of values that everyone agrees on, I think that is almost always going to be better. So in Israel, for example, there's a set of values based on the Tanakh, based on the Torah, that the Jewish people live under, and that leads to a high trust society, right? Now, provided that you don't allow your society to become so diluted that now you end up with just multiple groups and everyone sort of have their own ideas, which is something that you're seeing in Europe right now. You can make it work, right? You can make it work with small groups that have different views, but the majority has to share in the same set of principles. Now, to your question about the party, I think the Freedom Front Plus at this point would, at least in theory, be the only party that I think closely aligns with my views. The thing that I would like to have some clarity on from the Freedom Front Plus is, it's very difficult to express this because I don't actually know what the correct words would be for it. But I fear a party that only espouses to one group. And let me clarify this. I'm not a believer in the Rainbow Nation. I don't believe that the Rainbow Nation could ever have worked. I believe that it is a complete farce because I don't believe in force. Right. I don't believe that the government can force different groups together and it will just magically work out. I think if you want to have a Rainbow Nation, it has to happen organically. It has to happen with people just sort of coming together and finding common ground, right? So I'm a firm believer in culture being super important for cohesion, not necessarily race. So I do think that for the Freedom Front Plus, it's imperative that they shift their focus from just Afrikaner to the Afrikaner culture being the thing that they espouse. Because I do actually think you have a lot of Black people and English people and colored people and Indian people in this country that culturally align much more with the Afrikaner than they do with the ANC, for example, or with the EFF, right? And if you can build a coalition around a culture, in other words, a culture that respects the individual, that respects private property, that it respects the rule of law, that is something that you can rally and build around. And then if people want to have their own folk start, go for it, right? I'm not going to stand in your way. Have your folk start. I would prefer not to have a folk start insofar as, an Afrikaner folk start, because I'm afraid I might end up living next to Kim Heller or Peter Kriel because they're also Afrikaner, so I would prefer if my society is culturally the same as I am. And then I couldn't care less what race they are.
You're right. No, but that also does make a lot of sense because it's just a simple matter of compatibility, right? Like, regardless of what your race or religion is, that doesn't matter. All I care about is that you and I can work towards the same kind of goals for our society. Like if
Yes.
you believe in Sharia law, I don't care if I don't care if we're related. If you believe
Yeah.
in Sharia law, we are not compatible. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
in that sense, you make a lot of sense. And I do agree to a certain extent when it comes to the Freedom Front Plus, because when I was doing just my own research and just watching, just observing how the parties behave, um, I'll throw the ACDP in there on my side. But again, I
Mm,
don't think they really have that growth potential. Like they've
mm.
never proven to be that kind of party that, is able to mobilize people and have great PR campaigns. So it just seems that they're not really
Mm.
going anywhere. I don't know, but I agree with you to a large extent on the Freedom Front Plus, because even when it comes to, for example, the name, sometimes, again, because of the translation, it's Vryheidsfront Plus, then it's Freedom
Mm.
Front Plus. Then some people are referring them to FF Plus, others the VF Plus, others
Mm.
FF. So it gets a bit confusing. So I'm kind of like, guys, we need to,
Yeah, we need to get
you
one.
need to pick one.
Yeah, but
Yeah. So
I do
I
think
definitely get that.
their message just needs to be refined insofar as it's conditioned on choice and freedom. Because you hear a lot of people also now conflating Cape independence with, oh, you want to bring apartheid back. The Western
Oh
Cape is
God, yeah.
majority colored, right? So what apartheid? Like, how are you going to get apartheid back in a majority colored area? And I will just like to say to people, if you live in Cape Town, and I'm sure many of the viewers probably don't live in Cape Town, and I come from the north, right? So I come from Limpopo, a place where no one actually got the memo that apartheid has ended. Then I moved to Pretoria, where people are sort of desperately trying to make the Rainbow Nation work, but no one really cares all that much about it. And one of the things that I found when I moved to Cape Town is the majority of people you meet have almost completely forgotten about the past of South Africa. The race relations in Cape Town specifically, especially between coloreds and white people, but also a lot of black people, is just normal, right? Like there's no real animosity, there's no real anger. People are friendly, people are friends. It sort of doesn't seem as bad as it was in the north, right? In the north, there were very clear distinctions made. Um, and I'll use a silly example, but in the north, I remember whenever you went to a shop, right? So like Pick and Pay or Checkers, you would be met with two types of responses, most generally speaking. Every once in a while, you would meet someone that's very friendly and very nice, but most of the time, you'd meet two responses. You'd either get a cashier that won't look you in the eye, right? Almost this subservient submission. Oh, the boss is here kind of approach, or you would get someone that is extremely arrogant, and you're almost an imposition to them at the store. Like the fact
Wow.
that you're trying to buy from them is almost an imposition. And one of the things that I found immediately coming to Cape Town, and this entire thing, both responses, by the way, is born from the same thing. There's a lack of belief in the self. So there's a self-confidence issue there that either manifests itself in arrogance or manifests itself in this almost, you know, just sort of begging to be noticed. You don't see that in Cape Town. You're an equal. You walk into the store and they treat you like an equal. They speak to you like an equal. And it was refreshing as hell to walk into a store and just see this colored lady treating me like a boy, like any Afrikaner woman would do. She was older than me. She was like in her 60s. And she
Yeah.
was talking to me like a Tanny in her 60s would be talking to me, right? Because she's older, I'm younger. And you immediately go, wow, I didn't expect this. But why did it happen in Cape Town, and why is it not happening in the rest of the country? You see, in Cape Town, I don't believe it was ever really forced. I think it just sort of happened. You know, you look at Cape Town schools, they're very mixed. Even the Afrikaans schools You're like, well, there's black kids coming out, there's colored kids coming out, there's white kids coming out, and everyone's just sort of going to school together. So it was just automatically melting together. In the North, it was very much forced. I know for a fact of a bunch of principals and headmasters of schools who fought desperately to try and keep English kids out of their schools. And the government came in and said, you will take these kids. Right? And these headmasters were like, every teacher I have is an Afrikaans teacher. Even the English teacher struggles to speak English. And now you want me to get English and Sepedi kids in here. How are we teaching them? Right? But this was forced. And so the force almost created this hatred, because now I'm being told what I can and cannot do rather than being respected. And so that's what I would want the Freedom Front Plus to start to focus on, is that it will be by your own choice, right? So if we're going to do federalism, it's not going to be a case of, well, you're Sepedi, go back to Limpopo. No.
Yeah.
If you're Sepedi and you want to live with other Sepedis, you can go to Limpopo. But if you want to live with, the most Afrikaner group you could ever imagine, and you like the way they do things, yeah, go live there. If they don't have a problem with it, go live there, right? And everyone will just sort of, I'm struggling to find the English word for this.
What you mean, integrate?
Yeah, but not by force, but by what's the English word when you're doing it of your own free will? But there's a nice English word for it.
Geez, I'm trying to think. Because all I would just say, like, yeah,
voluntary.
You want to integrate, assimilate. Oh, volunteer. Okay.
Voluntary. It will be voluntary, right? Everyone will just
be voluntary.
Everyone will live where they want to live, where they feel most comfortable, and as long as it doesn't make an imposition. So if the Zulu Kingdom, for example, of KwaZulu-Natal said, hey, we don't care that Chris Papas can speak Zulu, we don't want him to live in Zululand. That's their right. They have a right to say Zululand is for Zulus, right? And so the people of Orania have the right to say, if you're not Afrikaner and you're not Christian and you're not white, you can't live here. Great, that's your right. But someone else can form another town and they can just go, we want you to be a Christian and we want you to be a capitalist. That's our only requirement. We don't care about the race. And then what you'll have is sort of like the Americans, where you will have these different experiments that sort of pop up all over South Africa. And in about 50 years, we'll be able to see who did it best, right? Which parts are flourishing and which parts are struggling. And now we can start to borrow from one another, right? And different places can adopt and can adapt. So that's what I would like to see from the Freedom Front, is to explain that better to people. Because I think that's what the Freedom Front Plus wants. But I think they sometimes fail in explaining it.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And your sort of journey, it's actually similar to mine in a way, because, well, I've been abroad quite a lot, but when I was living specifically in South Africa, I grew up in Mpumalanga on a farm, and then moved to the Joburg, well, Ekurhuleni, but for those who know, Ekurhuleni is basically Joburg. Like, you can't see where one begins and
the whole of Gauteng is basically Joburg. I mean, even Pretoria, it's like, I'm going from Pretoria to Joburg. When? Like, where does it start? It's just one big city at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But yeah, like, basically the point is, like, coming then to this sort of side, and even just during my time in Joburg proper, like actual city of Joburg, you just see how cosmopolitan it is. I guess that's where it's a little different to Pretoria, because like in Joburg, I feel like it's kind of like what you're describing in Cape Town, where you just don't really see, like, okay, maybe there's some people, but majority, you just don't really see a problem. And like, if I look at, for example, the different people who are dating, you see a lot of couples, mixed race couples getting together. You see friends sitting at a restaurant of different races. Like, it's not a big deal. And I guess it's similar to what you're saying in Cape Town, where because it's a cosmopolitan place and, people are coming from all over the country to work and to live there, it's kind of just become that way, not because anybody forced it. It just naturally evolved. Nobody said, I'm going to go to Joburg because I don't know, Indian and I need a black wife. I don't know. Now I think I'm just
Yeah,
talking
well,
nonsense, but
no, I
nobody's
get fully
nobody's
what you're
like
saying.
going there to force a point. They're just
Mm,
saying, I'm going there. I'm going there to work. I'm going there for whatever other reason, maybe because it's an exciting place. And as people just naturally move, they adapt and things change. So I just think it is very important that people have that sort of free will. I'm not
mm,
sure how your plan will work. I guess maybe there could be a level of federalization because I've
mm,
actually been thinking a lot about that. And I'd actually like to ask you because you brought up the Cape exit, but then you
mm.
also spoke about federalization. And I've always been one that said, like, well, again, this is just my personal opinion, but I'm not from the Cape. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't see how Cape independence can practically work. But
Mm,
federalism, where you basically have, each province basically becoming a state, that's something that I'm thinking could work. But
yeah.
before I jump ahead, what is your opinion on, well, firstly, Cape independence, secondly, federalism? Which one do you think makes more sense in the South African
Yeah.
context at this
So
moment in time?
I, I am a fan of Cape independence as a very much last resort. So we have tried everything else and it isn't working. Great, let's go independent. But I have family that still live in the north, right? What the hell is that now going to do? Because I floated the idea of moving to Cape Town to my dad, and he was like, no. He likes Limpopo. He likes the Bosveld. He doesn't want to live in Cape Town. He says it's beautiful, but he says it makes him depressed. It's too green. He doesn't like it. He wants the Bushveld. So, for him, that's in his blood. That's where he was born in Brits. He lived in sort of like the Bushveld his entire life. So for him, that's what he loves. And so I don't understand the
Sure.
independence thing because it's going to create this very messy divorce that I don't know how it's going to work, and I don't think it will in the long term because ultimately people do want to live together. I think Joburg and Cape Town is great examples of that. The majority of South Africans don't want to live apart, right? There are, and I have no hate
Sure.
towards them, right? There are people who just want to live on their own with their own people, and you should be allowed to do that. It's a free world, and you should be freely able to choose that. But the majority of people do not want to do that. They do want to live together. They do want to be friends with people from different races. They want to date outside of their own race if that is what they choose to do, and they don't want restrictions on it. So last resort maybe. In terms of federalism, not only do I think it can work, I think it's the only way South Africa works. I don't believe South Africa works from Pretoria. The National Party tried it. For almost 70 years, they tried desperately to run the country from, well, not 70 years, it was about 60 years, but they tried and it didn't work, right? The British tried it from Pretoria. I'm conflating dates here because the National Party tried it for almost 40 years. The British tried it for about 20, 30 years before that. You cannot govern South Africa from Pretoria because the problems in Pretoria are not the same as the problems in Joburg. They're definitely not
I
the same as
agree.
the problems in KwaZulu-Natal. And they're not the same as the problems in Mpumalanga or Limpopo. Okay. So a government in Pretoria does not govern this country. It will never work. Federalism is the only way that it does actually work. By giving the provinces full power to do what they want to do. And for anyone that's thinking, oh, so we're getting apartheid back. No, because the way federalism works is the government, the national government, has a constitution. The constitution sets the baseline. No province is allowed to circumvent the constitution. So if the constitution says that you can't have slavery, guess what? None of the provinces can bring back slavery. You can't have the Western Cape suddenly with millions of slaves being imported because the constitution says no slavery, right? And you have these provinces that's then able to fight against one another to figure out what is the best way to govern. And by fighting, I don't mean actual
Sure.
war. I mean, the Western Cape decides we're going to go full blown capitalist. Joburg says we're going to go full blown communist. And in 10, 15 years, you see which one works best, and people have the freedom to move. right? So those who don't want to live under communism
Yes.
leave and go to the Western Cape. Those who want to live under communism leave the Western Cape and go to Joburg. And that's how you figure it out.
I actually really like the explanation you gave. And I mean, I really have nothing more value to add. I think you summed it up perfectly, because ultimately it really does seem to be that ideal middle ground. You're still living under that same constitution. You've still got, that overarching, that national government, but you're doing sort of like the US. And you'll see that in practice. Like, the education department in, let's say, Gauteng will operate differently to or independently of the education department in other provinces, policing. It can happen across multiple ministries. So I actually think it's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing to consider. And it's kind of sad that people don't talk about it enough. And I feel like sort of the Cape independence talk has overtaken it, where you basically have everybody saying either, no, we need one South Africa, or no, we need Cape independence. Whereas it's kind of like, guys, there's this middle ground that can work really well if we just give it a bit of attention and maybe think on this. So yeah, I really like that.
Well, I'll make this prediction for anyone that wants to say, no, we need one South Africa. The inevitable result of a one South Africa is civil war. And it will happen within the next decade. South Africa will go to civil war because there's too many different cultures living completely separate lives. And each of these cultures believe that they're doing it right. So you can't have one government telling the Zulu, you're wrong, we're all going to do it this way, right? But you can't also have one single government telling the Afrikaner, you're wrong, you have to be doing it like the Zulus do it. Because guess what? If they choose the Zulu, there's 11 other cultures that's going, what the hell, bro? I don't want to do it that way. So it just can't work. You need a system where people are and I think our provinces should be redrawn as well, just FYI. I think our provinces don't make a lot of sense. Now the provinces should be drawn in such a way that it is possible for every group to govern themselves if that is what they choose to do. Yeah,
that's an interesting take you have, and I think a very interesting prediction to leave it on. So let's see how things develop. It will definitely be interesting. Hopefully, some people who are watching this can pass on the idea that, listen, guys, federalization is a potential solution.
I hope so.
Now, Stephan, thanks so much for coming on. It's great to hear your perspective on things. And look, for people who might not be subscribed yet, and they do want to hear more of what you have to say and your analysis and what's going on, where can people find you and follow you?
Oh, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. It was, it was very nice of you to allow me to ramble and just go on and on and on, because, you don't always have the opportunity to do that. So I really appreciate that. And then, people can find me on StephanZA over on YouTube. It's literally Stephan, PHZA. Pretty easy, or at least I hope that it's pretty easy. And over on X as well, StephanZA or Gaming Grifter. I don't know how to change the handle. It won't let me. But Gaming Grifter is what I used to be when I was making gaming videos. And it was sort of a play on words, because they called all of us conservative gamers grifters. And so I was like, oh, okay, fine. Then I'll be the Gaming Grifter if that is what you need me to be. So and I don't think I have any other social medias. I have a TikTok, but I can't remember what it's called. So just
no stress. Well, we'll make it a collaboration. So anybody who clicks on the subscribe button below, you'll be able to see if you subscribe to this channel, if you subscribe to StephanZA. And so just make sure that you subscribe to both. Thanks again, Stephan. It's great to have you on, and hopefully we'll have another chat in the not too distant future. All the best.
Yeah, I hope so. I need to get you on my show now so that I can ask you questions and get your opinion on stuff.
I look forward to it. I really do. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and if you did, please remember to subscribe to this channel as well as Stephan's channel as well. and I'll see you again on the next video. Until then, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.